Good afternoon. How are you today? Well, it's a little chilly, even though the temperature is 52. It feels more like 42, and we don't have the sun. So that you don't have that psychological heat to go with you. But other than that, it's still pretty nice out. The thoughts I have today are about violence in America. I'm thinking of police violence. Tyre Nichols being assaulted by a number of officers. And also, I'm thinking of Nancy Pelosi's husband, who was beaten in the head with a hammer that broke his skull. But let's talk about Mr. Nichols first. I didn't know this, and I would recommend that unless you're too anxious about watching the video, that you watch the video. And the reason I say that is because it's informative of the vicious way these officers go after Mr. Nichols, a relatively young man. He's slight of person. He had an illness that was described that I don't remember the name of and don't understand anyhow. And this whole incident happened within, 100 feet of his home. And the incident was there was some traffic maneuvers, and a police officer felt he was cut off or something. And so he got out of his squad car with attitude, and they literally pulled him out of his car, and they were tasering him and beating him up. But this is the part I didn't realize, and maybe some of you did. He managed to escape them and run down the road, and the police officers chased him, but they didn't have a chance of catching him. Then a period of time, 20 minutes or a half hour, they found him again, and this is when he was literally beaten to death, although he didn't die at the site. And in the first encounter, they kept saying to him, lay down or something like that. He says, I'm on the ground. I'm on my stomach. Reports say that he asked for his mother. I didn't hear that, but maybe it was in the second one. And how do we have these recordings? Well, it's interesting. In the first recording, these people all have their cameras on and the sound. And the action is so brutal, and the distance between the camera and the action so close, it's just chaos. But in the second incident, there's only one camera on, same one that was on at the beginning, but it's on a post, unbeknownst, or at least unaware to the officers of its existence. And that tells us a lot. The terrible thing about it is that they talk sort of like celebrants after they have harmed him, and he's lying on the ground, and they try to pick him up to stand on his own feet, and he can't. And it was 3 days later in the hospital that he died. Something like the injuries that I think happened on the Hill, these kinds of beatings. They kicked him viciously and so forth. And probably running as he did and being caught, the psychology and physical damage, and it took 22 minutes for a car to get there to pick him up. So those officers, 5 of them, were in custody that evening. Now, I counted 6 or 7, and I don't know who the others are. And toward the end, a person appeared on the scene without a jacket that said police on the back, and he seemed to be sorting out the details. And I have a feeling, not a knowledge, that there are 2 other persons that somebody should have talked to, and maybe they did. Maybe they felt that they weren't part of it. I don't know. It was a disaster, and it doesn't hurt to say that it was black on black, which is terribly disappointing. And it says something about a police ethic that is brutal in diversity against citizens. So are we reforming people to act like this? And then you hear the talk of how one fellow who kicked him is complaining about, I think I hurt my knee, I can't find my glasses. So immune to what they'd done to another human, fairly gentle in appearance and weak, and so how does this happen? I think of Trump saying to police officers, all police officers, the next time you're putting somebody in the squad car, don't be so careful with your hand so they avoid hitting their head as they get in the car. That's Trump in one case. The second tape that I saw is also pretty distressing, and that is that the officers go to the house, the Pelosi home, and I've been there. It's a beautiful place, and it's fairly accessible, which explains how anybody could get into it, I suppose, and how the surveillance cameras weren't paid attention to because nothing had been happening, so nobody was on alert, and nobody is monitoring the information they're collecting, which on this day was this fella, David Poppy or DePepe, I don't know, who broke in. Now, when the officers knock on the door and it opens, facing them on the left is the assailant, David. On the right, in his night clothes, I think he had a pajama top and shorts, is Mr. Pelosi. And Mr. Pelosi has his right arm extended to a hammer. And the assailant, or soon-to-be assailant, he is holding the hammer and he has it on the handle. And when the officers come in the presence of the officers who say, put that down, and Paul resists it, but the assailant, David, manages to get full control of the hammer, and he raises it above his head, and he brings it down hard on Paul's skull. And Paul is unconscious. And the officers climb over the two bodies, which are both on the ground at this point, and they tie up the assailant and cart him off to jail. You have to keep in mind that we have had this historically remarkable and depressing event on January the 6th, in which there were those people who wanted to kidnap the speaker, his wife. And they hoped by going to the house that she would be at home, and David, could question her, and depending on what she said, if it was the truth, he was going to let her go. The arrogance, the presumption of an individual. And he said this to the police, by the way. So here we have it. Violence in America. And the other night when Ari and I were talking, I basically said what you've heard me say before, which is, in the absence of a rule of law, standards of conduct that people can presume upon, things they can trust, they're willing to go in and fight within the process that's set up to challenge the law, the facts in a situation, an outcome in a civil or a criminal context. They're willing to rely on what public officials say to them and so forth if they are proven true. But if instead you have none of these benchmarks of reliability, of civilization, then violence reigns. And what our challengers don't understand, that is, these supremacists and authoritarians and these autocrats, is that how do they expect to rule should they win? Because it's only power that keeps them in office, gets them in office, and keeps them in office. And that means the military, as has been true of other dictatorships and authoritarian regimes, monarchists rely on that kind of violent power to keep the people in line. That's us, we the people. So that's the risk. Now, I can't say these two incidents represent that America is here and our recovery is impossible, that is, to return to a place of trust in a republic and a democracy. But if we don't act, if we continue not to act, we can pay a high price as other nation states have in the past. The word here, it seems to me, is to act to challenge the rule of thumb world and everything about it. For I think our sense of it implies there has to be a better order, and we don't have that now, and we're the only ones responsible to make it happen, to give strength to those elected officials who get it and who care and who realize the question is a big one. So I'm out in my cathedral of trees, and it's been very pleasant talking to you, and I want to thank all of you for the kind words and things you did at our appearances the other day. I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye-bye.